Thank you. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. So thanks to everybody. Blue Sky's great. Love them all. They've been great. Michael's show is great. If you haven't looked at it, check it out. Okay, so I'm going to kind of talk about a couple of bodies of work, not just the work that you're seeing now, because I sort of want to put everything into sort of like context of who I am as an artist. So I'm going to go through 3 bodies of work that I made since I graduated from grad school, so in the last 13 years. And I'm going to share them chronologically so you can sort of see how each project built on the last project. So this piece isn't actually part of any of the work that I'm going to show, but I think it's like a good representation of my work or what I want my work to be as an artist, because it's kind of like whimsical, but it's also kind of strange and humorous, and those are things that I think run through most of my work. So the projects that I'm going to talk about are all kind of about different topics, but what I see about as the main thread through all of it is obsession. So as a teenager, I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder, and I'm sure many of you know what OCD is, but it's a mental illness characterized by obsessions and compulsions. So obsessions are defined as thoughts, images, or impulses that occur over and over again and feel outside of a person's control. And compulsions are repetitive behaviors or thoughts that a person uses with the intention of neutralizing, counteracting, or making their obsessions go away. So as I'm going through my work, you'll see that the work that I make is born out of an obsession, and I'm sort of channeling that obsession into art making, which ends up being this compulsive behavior that I use to sort of alleviate my anxiety. So the first body of work I'm going to show is called Ex-Boyfriends. This is a project that I made when I was in my mid-20s, like right after I graduated from grad school. I have a hard time talking about this work because I really approached it with like an earnestness that I now find like a little bit embarrassing. But even though I wouldn't make it today in the same way that I made it then, I think it's important to include because it helped me kind of get me to where I am today. So I'm going to sort of talk about the process of making the pictures from when it began to when I kind of just like moved on from it at a certain point. So after graduate school, I felt a sort of freedom to make work without the immediate threat of critique from my peers. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do next with my work, but I was afraid that if I stopped taking pictures that I wouldn't start again. At the time, I was in a relationship that wasn't working, and so I started to think about some of my exes. Romantic relationships have always been a source of obsession, and breakups have always felt incredibly catastrophic to me. So I thought it would be a good idea to try to photograph all of my ex-boyfriends. When I originally approached this, I was thinking all my ex-boyfriends, like I went back to middle school boyfriends. And this was a decision that I made sort of on impulse, and in retrospect, I did it kind of to cope with my anxiety around what it meant to be an artist after graduate school, my anxiety about the relationship that I was in, but at the time I convinced myself that this was an act of feminism, of taking back power that I felt I'd lost through breakups, and that was kind of the premise that which I started the work. I was thinking about these sort of things in pop culture, so like Alanis Morissette, her album Jagged Little Pill is really, you know, she sings about breakups and like relationships and exes in a way that's like so angry that I could really relate to. And then I was thinking a lot about people like Taylor Swift, who like made her entire career out of writing and singing about her exes. And I was just like thinking about these people and how I hadn't really seen that method of art making, like visual art making. Like a lot of musicians make work about breakups, but not a lot of artists do. Or visual artists do. So I just started to reach out to people. So the first few men that I reached out to agreed to participate right away. They were either artists themselves or people who I had remained on good terms with after we broke up. I photographed them in their bedroom or in my bedroom, or in one case, a rent-by-the-hour motel room. I asked them to pose in their underwear because I thought everybody looks uncomfortable in their underwear, and I was hoping to convey a sense of vulnerability to the viewer. So I often use photography as a way to connect with people, which is why portraiture is pretty present in most of my work. But unlike previous work that I had made, with this work I was really forcing connection and a sense of intimacy with someone beyond any level of comfort. I do want to point out that I primarily use a large format view camera to photograph. So these are the cameras where you put the dark cloth over your head. And so it's like this really big, cumbersome camera, and the process of making pictures is longer than like it would be with most other types of cameras. So that added to the whole awkwardness of the situation, where I was fully clothed and my exes were in their underwear. And then I was like using this massive camera that took a really long time to take pictures. And they often didn't know what they were getting themselves into before I showed up. So I lit the subjects with strobes, partially because logistically I didn't want to be confined with whatever window light was available wherever I was photographing, but also I wanted to have the ability to kind of print them in a way where everything was lightened to sort of give them this ethereal quality. And so in addition to this like large camera, I also had lights that I was like bringing into usually like pretty small spaces to try to photograph. So like this moment that I thought was going to be kind of like private and intimate really turned into something that was kind of really produced and uncomfortable. So because it was easy at first to get people to participate, I was thinking more about the power and control that I thought I could gain through taking these pictures. As we all know, there's a long history of men photographing and painting and sculpting women in nude or semi-nude states, and I thought that this could be an inverse of that power dynamic with me behind the camera, while my ex-boyfriends essentially allowed me to objectify them in the service of my own art career. So these are some examples of artists that I was looking at in contemporary photography at the time. So I was thinking about how visually and formally people objectify within a photograph. And so these are two of many artists that I was looking at that were like, you know, white men objectifying women. And I was just kind of picking apart formally what they're doing in this. So on the left, we have Richard Leroyd. So the viewers, we're looking at the body, this woman's body, and she's kind of like dazed and looking away. So it's kind of like we have this, you know, permission to look at her, but she's not confronting us about it. And then on the right, it's Todd Heido. And so the way that he's sort of using the light to really highlight her breasts, like kind of adds to this idea of sexuality and really makes it a very sexual picture when it doesn't necessarily need to be. So I was kind of looking at that work, but as I was working on my own projects, I realized that I was like coming up against roadblocks for like how I was exercising power. So I had a few successful shoots, and then I started reaching out to people who I maybe wasn't on such good terms with, and they were not thrilled about the idea of posing for me in their underwear. So I started to sort of collect some of the correspondence I was having with them. So these are two different people and like my attempts to reach out to them on, it was like 2014, so Facebook Messenger was like kind of big. So this is how I was reaching out to them. The one on the right, he knew what I was asking him, so he didn't even respond. Like I didn't even give him any context for what I was gonna say, and he just didn't respond. And this went on for months. I was messaging him for months, just like, hey, 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 and he never responded. And then when they did respond, they were using it as an opportunity to sort of get something out of me in return. Usually it was like a companionship of some sort. So it would become this big back and forth where they wanted to meet up with me in person, and they would be like, well, maybe I'll think about it, and then I would leave, and then they would be like, I need to talk about it a little bit more. And so it was like this really long, cumbersome sort of process to even get them to agree, and then sometimes even after like seeing them multiple times, they would just be like, no, I don't really want to. So I was getting really frustrated, but I also found it like was really hard to give up on my idea. So I had to sort of pivot to be like, okay, maybe I'm not really empowered in this in these relationships or in this project, and so I have to kind of think about how to really continue making the project with all of these roadblocks. So I went back and started, you know, collecting these conversations. So this is an email that I really like because it gives the viewer a sense of how my exes were looking at it. So I'm not going to read the entire email. This is very long. But he writes things like, I won't pretend to know exactly what it is that you're doing, but I don't think you do either. And then he goes on to explain his concerns about being a page in a catalog, objecting myself and our years-plus relationship to a viewer's game of who's sexiest, or the concern that this isn't the innocent reconnection that you like to pitch, but more of a dominating conquest to gather the heads of those you've most intimately encountered. And then he signed it, Love and Regrets. So, but then after he wrote this email, he ended up participating. So that was like really a mind mess with my mind. Another way that I kind of gave up my original plans was that I had an ex who didn't want to be photographed, but he also was a photographer, so he volunteered to photograph me instead. So it was kind of this like very obvious flipping of the power dynamic where I was like, I'm in charge, and he was like, if you want me to participate, I have to be in charge. And I was like, okay. So I kind of like let him do this, and I didn't really realize until later that he had just kind of like taken all of the power from me. Because I was so desperate for the pictures that I just was like, whatever you want. And so ultimately the pictures are a document of an interaction of this push and pull for power that was going on between my exes and I at the time. I display some of them as diptychs where they're looking at the camera in one and away from the camera in the other, like they're looking at me and I'm looking at them, but both acts of looking are holding equal weight. And there's a world in which I would love to display the pictures side by side or put them in a book side by side with the interactions, not like a one-to-one of sort of like, here's the person and here's the conversation we had, but more like weaving the text throughout the pictures. I really am interested, especially now, like 10 years later, that in a lot of the ways the pictures are kind of timeless. Like there's not a lot of markers that point to where or when the pictures were taken, but the text pieces are like all on the internet, so they're very specific to time and place because of the visual interface of, iMessage or Facebook Messenger or whatever we were using to talk. Here's some examples of how they were displayed. So I displayed them 4 by 5 inches, so that's the size of the negatives that I'm using, but then I was framing them in 16 by 20 inch frames so that people had to get like really physically close to the pictures to see them, but that they're still in kind of like this big frame that gives them a sense of weight. And then they were picked up by several blogs and websites, and I really enjoyed the way that people wrote about them. So specifically like the subheaders are great, like the camera helped her get closure. And photographer lives your worst nightmare, photographs her exes in their underwear. So I found like while I was dealing with this like personal obsession that it was kind of a relatable thing that people were like, oh, I get it, or like maybe I see a reason that someone might want to do this. And so eventually I kind of just had to move on from the work. There's a world in which I would love to go back to it and kind of like wrap it up because it's kind of open-ended right now, but I think I would, if I went back now, like a lot of people that I've dated since then are like, straight up, I'm not gonna be in your project. So that wouldn't really help me. But I think I would do it with like a different type of lens. Like I would be looking at it with more humor than I was looking at it at the time. But it kind of lent to this like kind of mini project that I did. I was really bored at work, so I just decided to post a job for a boyfriend on Craigslist. So I wasn't really thinking about it as art, but just like something I felt like doing at the time. And just like quick trigger warning, there's a mention of suicide in the next slide. So I got all these responses and I turned them into a digital collage. So I got pictures, some resumes, some cover letters, a bunch of just like text email responses. And they said things like, find yourself first before dragging a new boyfriend into your bizarre world. And sent me like pictures of themselves or pictures of Jonathan Taylor Thomas, which I really liked. And so this was kind of the first time that I really used humor in my work. And so this was really, I think, pivotal to me as an artist in my growth. And then also this digital collage aesthetic kind of, as you can see, comes back into my work later. But at the same time that I was sort of, well, like right after I was working on my ex-boyfriends, I started to work on this other project that had been in the back of my brain for quite some time. So I made it through 2016 and 2019, and it's called Thank You for the Flowers. So the backstory between this work, or from this work, is that I grew up in New Jersey, but I was adopted from Iowa at birth. When I was 21, I asked my adopted parents for my file, which had all the paperwork from my adoption. So on the left is my original birth certificate with my biological mother's name, and I have no biological father listed. And then on the right is the birth certificate that was reissued after I was adopted. And that has my adopted parents' names on it. In the file, I found this letter from my biological mother that she had written to my parents shortly after I was adopted. They had sent her flowers for when she returned home from the hospital, and so she starts the letter off by saying, "Thank you for the flowers." And in the letter, she asked if the adoption could be open, if she could send me gifts for my birthday, and if they would keep her updated about my growth. And then there was another letter in the file from about a month or so later asking if they received this letter, and it turns out that they never responded. And I didn't know about either of these letters growing up. So I immediately searched for her on Facebook, and she popped up. And I sent her a friend request and a brief message that said something like, "Did you give up a baby for adoption in 1987? And she wrote back, and I'll read you what she said. "Hi, Laura. I've often wondered when or if the day would come that I would hear from you. I'm going to be upfront about things, and I hope you will understand and respect my position. We kept my pregnancy a secret from our families. It was a decision that was tough to deal with, but one I've never regretted. At the time, I was selfish, immature, and afraid to grow up, which would have been required if we had chosen to keep you. We're not in a place in our lives where we can share the news with them now. Perhaps when they're older, I don't know. With that said, I won't be accepting you as a friend on Facebook. That sounds much harsher than I intended. If you have questions, send me a message through Facebook and I will try to answer them to the best of my ability. I don't want to shut you out completely. Laura. P.S. Love your pictures." So her name is also Laura. So before I had received this message back from her, being adopted was kind of this it didn't feel real. It was a fact about who I was, and it was something that was always framed as a positive in my life, but it didn't really feel tangible. And after I got this message, it brought into focus that there was another person on the other end of my adoption, and that for her, the experience was one of shame and something that she was keeping a secret from her family. So I started to sort of become obsessed with trying to find her online and trying to figure out what her life was like now. So her and my biological father ended up getting married and having 3 kids. So I have 3 biological siblings that don't know about me. So I was collecting photographs of them that I found online, and I am building, and I still do this today. I built an archive of pictures of them through the years. And it was kind of one of the ways that I was dealing with my obsession. And it's something I do kind of in a lot of different ways where I'm just collecting images online. And so after years of kind of doing this, I realized that I should probably, maybe try to make this into some form of art. So, and I knew I couldn't meet them, but I wanted to think about other ways that I could express my thoughts about being adopted. So throughout my life, Iowa had been a character in my adoption story. This is a map that I found in my adoption file that highlights the route my parents drove from the hotel to the courthouse to adopt me. So I was raised in New Jersey, and my parents would talk about Iowa. For those of you from the Midwest, sorry if this is upsetting, but my parents would talk about Iowa as if it was like in another world. They would be like, it was so flat and so empty, and there's nobody there, and you can't see anything but corn. And so it made it seem like this place that I would never be able to go to. So I decided to visit Iowa and photograph there. When I approached the project, I had 2 questions. 1, can I better understand my biological family without actually meeting them, but by visiting the place where they live and where I was born? And 2, how can I use photography to communicate the story of my adoption and my feelings around it? So I'm gonna put 2 pictures side by side for a lot of these because the way that the photographs relate to each other is really important to the project. So I started out by making these pictures of what I considered to be an idealized version of an Iowan childhood. So I was seeking out places where families or groups of friends would spend time together. I went to a bunch of water parks. I visited a lot of lakes and swimming holes. But the documentary style photographs of Middle America didn't really capture what I wanted to say or communicate through the body of work. So I was kind of disappointed because I found that Iowa wasn't really different from a lot of the places that I live. It's actually not that different from New Jersey. And it definitely didn't match the dream that I had of it. So I started searching for moments that kind of captured the magic of the place, or this idea of what I thought Iowa was. I was thinking about the ways that photography can be used as a tool of transformation. So these are a couple of artists that I used as visual inspiration for the project. And they, Delaney Allen and Rinko Kouchi, who both use light and color to transform the mundane into something really magical. And so I was doing something similar with my work. So this is a sign that I would drive by every day while I was in Iowa, and I sort of fell in love with it because it had tacos on sale, which I was like, I don't know about that. But then one night I drove by it at night and I was like, oh, this is like a really different thing. And I was thinking about how light can really create something that's like of a different world. So in the pictures, I'm playing with the push and pull of what the viewer can and can't see as a metaphor for my search and my looking. I'm obscuring parts of the photo by covering up parts of the lens or photographing through a foggy car window. And I wanted to visually communicate this idea of like what's unseen or what's unknown that I was feeling at the time. This is a picture that was kind of a happy accident. So I was at a demolition derby, and there was this woman there that was really interested in my camera, and she asked me to take her picture, but it was really dark out. So I didn't really want to take the picture, but I was like, fine, whatever. And so I went through the whole process of taking the picture, and I didn't think it would come out at all. And when I got the negative back, it was actually blank, but something made me decide to scan it anyway. And so this emerged when I scanned it. And I was like, this felt like a real moment to me of I was trying to find answers about my biological mother. And then this picture that's like a silhouette of a woman kind of appeared and you couldn't see her face. And so I thought it was really important and became central to the project. So over the course of about 3 years, I made 6 or 7 trips back to Iowa. Through photographing, I became friends with a group of teenagers, and I started to include them in the work, and I was thinking about how maybe they were stand-ins for me. So most of the pictures, or the portraits that are in the body of work are of women. So I'm thinking a lot in this picture of the way that their body language is mirroring each other's, and it kind of reminded me of familial traits and shared mannerisms and how a child will mirror their parents' actions or copy their older siblings' actions. This picture captures a sense of comfort and tenderness between 2 women, and this was meant to sort of stand in for a closeness that I was searching for when I went there. And just making pictures that kind of seem uneasy, like you're being confronted with something supernatural, or that you're looking for something and finding something else that you didn't want or expect, which it reflected how I was feeling when I was traveling around Iowa. Towards the end of the project, I decided to take a step further and create my version of Iowa through interventions with the space and people in them. So I was bringing lights down, and I went down to this cave and I brought these strobe lights there, or I kind of made these posed pictures with my teenager friends that kind of captured what I wanted Iowa to be. And I know that in the end, the work doesn't really tell specifically the story of my adoption, but instead it captures and conveys the idea of searching and longing and looking for answers in a space that's not quite real. So I hope that these pictures resonate on an emotional level more than anything else, and I'm interested in the ways that different people find meanings in the photographs. This is how I have installed them. This was at a gallery at Muhlenberg College, and I printed them similarly to here as large stickers, but I was using different sizes and I kind of presented them non-linearly. And the goal was so people wouldn't just read them from left to right, but kind of go into the work and find their own way. So I wanted people to have different interpretations when they were looking at the work. Now I'm gonna switch gears. I love reality TV. It's just something I should say. So the last body of work, which is this body of work that I'm gonna share, it was born out of the fact that I love reality TV. So I'm a millennial. I was raised, kind of raised on reality TV, Survivor and America's Next Top Model. They kind of aired when I was growing up. And so it was something that was really important to the cultural landscape of my life. And for me, I've always used TV as a way for me to kind of turn off my brain, and reality TV is really good for that because you don't have to think a lot. So I was thinking about is there a way that I can sort of incorporate my love of reality TV into my work? So I started making some sort of little projects that kind of just happened because I love reality TV. So this is a show, these are some flowcharts that I made from a show called Are You the One, where, has anybody seen Are You the One? Okay, thank you. Usually people are So there's a bunch of people on an island, usually it's like 10 women and 10 men. They're living in a house in Hawaii, and they each have like a scientifically proven perfect match in the house. Don't know what the science is. But the goal of the show is for them to all find out who their perfect match is. So they have to like work as a group to find out who like some random producers decided was their perfect match. So it was like halfway through the season, and I wanted to figure out, like, it's kind of a math game more than anything else, because they do all these challenges to sort of like where they can find out if like certain couples aren't perfect matches. So like it was like halfway through the season, and I was like, can I figure out who everybody's perfect match is before they can figure out who everybody's perfect match is? So I made all these flowcharts of like the different possibilities of perfect matches, and then I like put them up on my wall, and I was like crossing them out as I was watching TV. And I did find out one episode before they found out, so, but they didn't have pens and paper, so I kind of feel like it's, they kind of win. So I was thinking, like, that's like one way that I was just obsessed with reality TV, and I can't, like, I felt like I couldn't hold it in, like I needed to do something with this obsession. This is another kind of thing that happened during COVID. I decided to transcribe an entire season of The Bachelorette. Which again is just something I like did because I was like, I love this season so much and I need to like really understand it. So I transcribed an entire season. It took about an hour per every 10 minutes. So it took me 110 hours to transcribe the whole season. And then I made these books from it. And I was thinking about like how reality television, it kind of mirrors society. But we kind of like poo-poo it and throw it out. And so I was thinking about like what happens when you give it weight, when you put it into a book. Does it hold more weight? Does it like tell us something? And the answer is like, not really. To be honest, I don't know. So it was an interesting exercise because when you strip away the visuals and the music from the show, it's just like a bunch of people being like, you're hot. I love you. Like that's kind of all it is. And so that was just another way that I like was exploring what I thought of reality TV. These are some other images that I made that I think I'm going back to soon, but I projected images from The Bachelor, and then I photographed it using my large format camera. It has like these camera movements that can distort images. And I was thinking about how to make these like really serious moments kind of like humorous by distorting them. But ultimately, it all kind of turned into this body of work called Influenced that explores the cultural phenomenon that occurs at the intersection of social media, fame, and capitalism, which is the influencer. So I was looking at my Explore page on Instagram and thinking about how this like one page kind of really like, it tells you a lot about yourself. It tells you a lot about, if you're on Instagram a lot, it tells you a lot about like where you're spending your time and what's important to you. And so I was like really thinking about, I was getting a lot of these reality TV content on my Explore page. So I was thinking about how reality television and the growth of the internet have kind of come together in this way where these people that are like really like G-list celebrities can go on reality TV and kind of like use that celebrity for much longer than they would have without the internet. So each picture represents an American reality television star turned influencer. So they're all still lifes. They're made up of products that the influencers advertise, so pictures from their Instagram feeds, and in most cases, 2D cutouts, like the ones in the gallery that I make of the influencers themselves. And I'm using the language of contemporary advertising, but instead of sort of like flawless images of unblemished product, you can see cracks in the pictures. So like sometimes things are broken or falling apart, or I leave clues about how the picture was made, and they're not really clues. Like I say that like they're intentional. They're just mistakes, honestly. Or I leave things in the picture that I didn't mean to, that kind of give us an idea as the viewer of like how these things were made. So in the end, it kind of emphasizes what we already know about advertising, but we kind of forget often, which is what you see in a picture isn't always real. These are some advertisements from Instagram that I've saved I've really looked at for visual inspiration in terms of color, lighting, form. I'm really trying to use this sort of aesthetic in the pictures. So I'm using the aesthetic of internet culture to critique internet culture. And I'm also looking at these artists who do a lot of commercial and editorial work, but it functions kind of in between the art world and the commercial world, and so blurring this idea of what we consider art and what we don't. And that's kind of a space that I'm interested in occupying with this work. So in some of the photos, I'm literally trying to create images that might be able to pass as advertisements, but there might be something off that indicates that they're not actually advertisements, so they're kind of like fake marketing campaigns. So in this one, it's like, this is Ozempic, which probably you know is a weight loss drug that has been co-opted by celebrity culture. And so thinking about how one might market Ozempic to be like this like light, like, oh, you could float away because you lose so much weight. And then, but then I'm also including like these, this like body fat that I made out of wax to try to like give this, like kind of like turn it on its head in a little way. And then the cutouts are really central to the pictures, so it might be a little bit too on the nose when I'm talking about the dimensionality of people that we see on reality television, but they're also a visual tool to play with, contrasting with the three-dimensionality of the other objects in the pictures. Sometimes, especially when you're looking at these small, you might not be able to realize that the cutout isn't a real person, but if you look for longer, you can see that like the perspective isn't quite right, or you might be able to see edges of the cutout or that parts of their body are cut off. This is a behind the scenes picture of how it actually looked, so how flat the cutout is in relation to the other things in the picture. And then on the top right is a sketch that I made of what I thought the picture would look like, which I usually do, like these digital sketches. This is a blank slide that I didn't mean for to be here. So in this photo, I wanted to emphasize the flatness of the figure by painting the logos directly onto her. I saw this picture on this Bachelor contestant's Instagram, and I thought it was like just this very typical like hot girl on the internet pose. And so I wanted to build a picture around that pose and draw attention to the branding. And then also using things like these like flower walls, which are set up at like celebrity events and non-celebrity events, just so people can take pictures of themselves in front of and then post online. So I use that as the backdrop. Another behind the scenes photo, so you can sort of see what it looks like in the studio and how much space I sometimes need to take up. Yeah. This photo is sort of another one that's kind of really pointing to advertising. This is about a Bachelor contestant whose storyline revolved around her career as a D1 college basketball player. And since her time on The Bachelor, she's become a Christian motivational speaker. So her feed is really interesting. There's like these videos of her preaching about like loving God. And then there's like, it'll be in between these videos, there will also be these like advertisements for fast fashion, like Just Fab or like Mountain Dew, and these things that she's trying to sell in between like whatever her message is about Christianity. So in this picture, there's sort of an intentional precariousness. The objects are sort of balanced on top of each other, and the idea is that it could all be destroyed in a moment, which speaks to the fleeting nature of influencer fame. This is an idea of how I make the pictures. So I set up the camera and I kind of build the picture for the camera. So the camera's there first and the pictures come with that. And I like showing this because I think it just helps people understand really what I'm doing in the studio. I think that the chaos of the photo reflects the frenzied world of social media. So each photo in the series has a story behind it, and the more that you know about these characters, the more that you'll see in the photo. So this is somebody from a show called Vanderpump Rules that has like branded himself as like a creative, like cool party boy. So he has this really, really bad cover band that I saw live that I wouldn't recommend. His name's Tom Sandoval, and his cover band is called Tom Sandoval and the Most Extras. And then he has this cocktail book with all these recipes that he made. And one of the recipes includes tequila, maple syrup, and Taco Bell fire sauce. And it's supposed to be mixed and served in an empty water bottle. So I incorporated like these products into the photograph, along with things like he has a male makeup line that's also in the picture. And so even though the pictures are really specific to certain influencers, the goal is that they're sort of commenting on these common social media tropes. So for example, in this photo, I'm using an influencer. He was a bachelor named Matt James, and I'm sort of talking about fitness influencers and food influencers. So his account is really made up of photographs and videos of him like working out combined with photos and videos of him eating like really unhealthy food. And so I wanted to sort of point to the aspirational but unrealistic lifestyles that influencers promote, not just in terms of wealth and money, but also in terms of body image. In a 2019 New Yorker article, writer Gia Tolentino coined the term Instagram face to talk about the gradual emergence among professionally beautiful women of a single cyborgian face. She goes on to describe Instagram face. It's a young face, of course, with poreless skin and plump high cheekbones. It has cat-like eyes and long cartoonish lashes. It has a small, neat nose and full, lush lips. It looks at you coyly but blankly, as if its owner has taken half a Klonopin and is asking you for a private jet ride to Coachella. The face is distinctly white but ambiguously ethnic. So in this photograph, I'm sort of thinking about these ideas of like how everybody kind of looks, all these women end up looking very similar through this influencer named Lala Kent. She promotes like Botox and breast implants on her page. And then similarly, this is a woman named Francesca Farrago from a show on Netflix called Too Hot to Handle. And her celebrity, at least at the time, was really based on her sex appeal in this sort of like traditional sense of what's seen as sexy. And I made all these cutouts of her, and as I was making them, I was like, this is not like a real person's body, because usually the cutouts are kind of life size. And I was like, this doesn't really exist in real life. So I was thinking about how either she's editing herself or she's just like maybe had a lot of plastic surgery to sort of get that way. And I'm also was really fascinated with the way that she was curating her Instagram to fit a really specific visual aesthetic, similarly to the way a company would like run an ad campaign. And I wanted to point to Instagram more directly in this picture, so I included these cutouts of tags that she, like of companies that she tags. Another thing that I wanted to address a little bit was performative activism on social media. So thinking about this Bachelor contestant who turned sex positive influencer. And she basically, she was like, while she was on The Bachelor, a bunch of like racist and sexist and fatphobic tweets that she had made like years past were unearthed. And so she issued this apology letter in the form of an Instagram post and, you know, kind of like edited it so it would visually fit in with her aesthetic. So I made this still life to like kind of talk about this. And so she was like advertising dildos and like Rihanna's underwear brand and tampons, and like in between there was just this like, I'm sorry, I'm racist. And then it was like more dildos. And so it was just kind of this like weird moment that I was like, oh right, because over time, like she issued this thing and it was like the first thing on her page, but very quickly it ended up being like at the bottom of her page. But she kind of like did this thing to like appease people and then hoped that it would eventually get kind of pushed out, which it did. So one of the things the questions that I receive most is like, why, if I don't watch these shows, why should I care? Like, how am I supposed to recognize people in pictures? Why should I care about them? How should I understand the pictures? So I sort of started to broaden the subject matter to include more commonly known celebrities, like that are household names that most people know. I don't want to say most people, but a lot more people know. So this photo is based on some ads that Kylie Jenner did for her really, really, really bad vodka drink that I would not recommend. And the ad was like really strange to me because it was just like her in a bathing suit posing in front of a mini fridge filled with her vodka drink. And so I just basically created the advertisement and then thinking about like, oh, how are people gonna know or understand what I'm doing? I just like took a screenshot of the ad and like plopped it right in the top corner of the photo so that people can like understand the reference. Similarly, these are both images that are focused on product lines that are created by celebrities and like built upon the brands that they have created for themselves. So on the left is Kylie Cosmetics, and like as in the gallery, there's like all these floating lips, her old lips and her new lips. So like lips before she got lip filler and lips after she got lip filler. And then the other one is a photo about Kim Kardashian, or Paris Hilton's fragrance line. And so the background is made up of screenshots from her sex tape, and then like how she's built this empire sort of on this idea that, or on the sex tape that she had. But I've pixelated the penises and the nipples so that I could post it on social media. And sort of thinking about Paris as this, she created this persona for herself that was really perpetuated by the media. So this was like in the early 2000s, she wore this t-shirt and was like dancing on top of this tank top and was dancing on top of a table. But actually, the shirt actually said stop being desperate, but someone photoshopped it to say stop being poor. And then that ended up being the image that circulated. And at the time, I think our culture was like less savvy about image editing. And so this like in history is just like what it is now. Like everybody thinks that Paris Hilton wore a shirt that said stop being poor. And so what I'm like finding with these pictures is, or what I like about making these pictures is that there's always like more to mine from, more to think about. And like there's always things also happening at the time that I can use to mine from. And I'm really trying to make sure that the work doesn't really become formulaic, but that every picture kind of builds upon the last. This is a photo of Kim Kardashian thinking about this app called Facetune that the influencers use to make themselves more beautiful, whatever that means. So I'm using the same tools that the influencers are using to market themselves, and I just kind of like Facetuned her over and over again, and obviously I put some of the cutouts in the gallery. And now I've started to think more about video. So I like do a lot of behind the scenes shots with my cell phone, and I'm realizing that like movement, and with TikTok, I feel like there is just this moment here where I really should be incorporating video into the work that I'm sort of trying to get a grasp on. And I post them on social media and I tag the celebrities in them just to see what happens. Most of the time they don't respond, sometimes they do respond or they'll repost, and that's like very funny and interesting to me. And like they don't seem to be mad about it, but we'll see. I would like love to, well, I wouldn't really love to be sued by a Kardashian, but like I kind of would love to be sued by a Kardashian, so we'll see. Some exhibition photos of elsewhere where I've showed these, so I'm always, when I'm showing work, trying to figure out like what's the best way to show it. So these are different sizes at a gallery in Boston called Abacus Projects. It's another installation shot using some of the objects. So, and this is the first time that I've used cutouts when I'm showing them, and I'm pretty excited about it. I also showed them in this hair salon in Boston, which I actually like really loved showing them there. So people thought that they were advertising. Like people thought that the hair salon was like advertising products. And so the hairstylist ended up like getting into conversations with people about the internet and visual culture and advertising in a way that I thought was really interesting to hear about with the work. And that's it. That's all I have. Thank you so much.
Anybody have questions for Laura Beth?
Or criticisms, yes. Thanks.
There's so much, it's so rich. And I was just wondering, like, what, could you speak more about the kind of obsession I see in the ways you use like film photography and how that transitioned into like the obsession of like digital manipulation? Because it seems like you're so intent in every like choice of like the lighting, how you place versus like, you know, the very controlled situations of these kind of like, but you still transition like types of photography.
Yeah.
What was the decision in that? Like how that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a disappointing answer, but so I use a large format camera, but not because I like think it's the best camera or because I like care about the quality of film, but mostly just because like I'm a really bad photographer if I use a different type of camera. So So like for me having, and I think this is kind of related to having OCD, like having my camera on a tripod, like being able to manipulate it in these like very minute ways is really important to me and like my attention span when I'm taking pictures. When you give me like a digital camera or even like a 35mm camera, I'm just like, like I barely am paying attention to what I'm doing. So it's not as much about like, oh, I'm trying to make a comment on like analog versus digital, but it's more just like what's gonna like get me the picture that I want, which is like maybe not what you're looking for, but it's the truth. Sorry. Yeah.
I think in general with kind of like this type of culture on the internet, like I feel like I have a hard time, I guess I feel like sensitive to it like getting into my brain, how I like feel about the world. And so I kind of tend to stay away from it, even though I'm like completely fascinated by it. I guess like how is your relationship with like social media and existentialism?
Yeah, no, it's like a good question, and it's something I constantly have to like ask myself, because I think working with these images of these women and like being a woman specifically today, it does get really hard at sometimes. And like there's points where I'm like, I wonder if my friends that like don't care about these celebrities are like feeling this way about themselves or whatever. And so I do find that I have to take a step back a lot of times. And like, I try to read a lot of like, you know, think pieces that are like criticizing it, because in certain ways I like can't help but buy into it. And I think that's like something that even as you know, a photographer who thinks about images and how they're made regularly, I can still be like tricked by it. There's like, they're doing something right on the internet that's like really messing with our brains. So I'm hoping that the pictures themselves like help other people kind of think about those things, but it is like a hard, and that's probably smart to stay away from it, to be honest with you. But yeah, it is like a weird thing that we have to contend with and trying to address in the pictures.
I have a very silly question.
Please.
Have you seen the show The Circle?
Yes.
Okay. I just, yeah, like as you were talking, I was just like, oh yeah, this feels like you're in the same way that, I don't know, I watched that show and I'm like, it's tackling this like social media, the way that we interact with people.
Yeah.
Well, that's how I watch it.
No,
It's
that is,
fascinating.
it is like, it's all about how people present themselves on social media. Like, and like the season that Lance Bass was on, which is like crazy, and playing like not Lance Bass. It was very weird. Yeah, I agree. Like, thank you. But yeah, I think about it a lot. Yeah. It's a good show. Would recommend.
I'm curious, from the first work that you make for this project to the latest work that you just made, has there anything changed for you? If so, like how things have changed for you towards?
Yeah, I think that like I started looking at these really kind of like niche celebrities that like I was interested in, and I wasn't necessarily thinking about like the larger cultural context when I started the work. And then the more that I like showed people the work, and started to have conversations about it and like understand how this was affecting like not just me and what I consume online, but it is like a much broader conversation, which is why I tried to like start bringing in like more well-known celebrities or personas into it, just to sort of talk about that. And then I started a lot with like thinking about consumerism, and now I'm thinking a lot about just image manipulation on the internet. Like I'm starting to think about AI and how that impacts like what we see online. And so I feel like there's just so much to mine, and it's great. Like it's nice to have subject matter that's consistently like changing and evolving. So yeah, I think over time it's just kind of broadened, and there's more things that I'm interested in. Thank you. Great.
Anybody else? All right, well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.